Hi everybody, this is Gijs again with another review and I hope you are doing well. This time it is a headlamp, the cute BioLite Headlamp 330. But being cute is not good enough, so is it any good outdoors? In this video I will give you all the answers, so watch the video. Welcome to the review on the BioLite Headlamp 330. If this is the first time that you tuned into my channel, I would like you to know that I am a 100% independent reviewer. I'm not being paid by manufacturers to make my reviews, I don't have any affiliate deals, and I don't have advertisements on my website. And after reviewing, I always send the products back to where they came from. Now, if you want to support my way of independent reviewing, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram and like my Facebook page. And also hit the alarm bell on YouTube so you know when I uploaded a new video. Now let's continue with the BioLite Headlamp 330. There is a little bit of history to this review. In November 2019, so that was last year, I got a press release from one of the news agencies in the Netherlands, and they were, well, basically bringing the news about the BioLite Headlamp 330. So I requested it for one of the magazines that I work for in the Netherlands, one of the outdoor magazines. I did some photography on it, and when I, was touching it and playing with it around, I had this idea like, okay, this is something different. This is not like the headlamps that I have, for example, from Black Diamond, LED Lancer, Silva or Petzl. This is really a different one. So I decided let's do a review on it. I've been playing with it for, ever since basically November. And when I wrote the review last week, I was checking some data on the BioLite website and I discovered that the BioLite Headlamp 330 was already released at the end of 2018. Maybe I've been sleeping, maybe the press agency in the Netherlands has been sleeping, or it's just being launched late in Europe or the Netherlands. I don't have a clue, and it doesn't matter because I still think the review on the 330 is really worth it. Now let's continue with all the details on the BioLite Headlamp 330. And first let me switch off the light because otherwise it might run out. The BioLite Headlamp 330, and of course the 330 stands for the amount of lumen that the lamp produces. And 330 lumen, that's something that BioLite claims. And I will get back to the lumen later. I put the whole unit on my scale, on my precise scale, and I measured a weight of 69 grams, and that is pretty low for a headlamp like this with a lamp unit in the front and a battery pack on the back. What surprises me that if you look at the packaging, BioLite claims very clearly that it produces 330 lumens, but there's not stated that it only weighs 69 grams. And for me, 69 grams is, the weight is always very important if I buy a headlamp. It's not all about lumens, but again, more on that later. Why is the weight so low? Well, in the first place, because the lamp unit is very lightweight, you can feel it like this. And on the back, the battery pack itself, it is a 900 milliampere hour rechargeable 3.4 watt Li-ion battery. And Li-ion batteries are always very lightweight. It's one big plastic sealed unit, so when your battery dies forever, you cannot exchange it or repair it, so then you'll have to buy a new headlamp. On the bottom of the battery pack, there is a micro USB charging point with a nice rubberized thingy to close it or to cover it and prevent rain or water getting into the battery pack itself. This one works well. Micro USB, and of course the micro USB cable is provided in the package. Next to the USB charging point, you see 4 LEDs, small LEDs. And this is basically the battery status indicator. So the lower the power of the battery is, the less lights you will see. So it's always good to know what your battery status is before you leave home, basically. The battery pack, it is very nicely well, sort of woven into the headband itself. It's got two elastic bands on both parts, so you can move it around along the headband, or you can move the headband around the battery pack, depending on where you want it to be situated, or depending on your head size, of course. What is also nice is that on the back of the headband you see this white printed thingy. This is a reflective part, so that when you're walking at night beside, for example, a road and cars coming from the back or from behind, they will see you because of this reflective part. Of course, a red lamp on the back of your backpack is always better, but this is, well, in case of emergency, it works very well. Now let's continue to the front, to the lamp unit itself. The nice thing about the lamp unit is that it can be tilted, like so. When it's like this, it shines in front of your feet, or when you're reading a book, this is the position, and when you tilt it back again, it shines way further in front of you when you're walking. Now let me go through all the light modes. You can see that the whole unit was tilted together. The two lamps are tilted in one go. Now there are two lamps basically in it, and on my left side, your right side, you see a smaller one. It is a spot LED. It's only one LED. When I turn it on, let's shift to the right mode. This is it, and I'm not sure if you can see it because it's very, very bright, shining into my camera, I think, so maybe I should turn it off again. This is a spot lamp, and BioLite claims it reaches about 75 meters, which is quite a distance, and I will get back on that one later too. Then on the right side, your left side, is a flood lamp, and I'll try to switch that one on as well, and turn it off again, because otherwise I will blind you. In the flood there are 4 small LEDs in a horizontal row, and it reaches, according to BioLite, 16 meters, and it is, of course, because it's a flood, it's a very wide beam, so you see a lot on the sides as well. Well, of course you can put both on together as well, so you got a spot floodlight combined, which is nice, and if you want to, every light individually, you can dim it just by pressing it, and then it flickers basically 2 times when it reaches to the end point. And if I want to switch it on or want to turn it up again, just press it again, 2 flickers, and now you know that you're in maximum power mode on both ones. Now you can do this for the spot, you can do this for the flood, and you can do this combined. What is also a good feature is that, and now I'll have to switch a bit further, this is the stroboscope lamp, or the modus, which I think is also very good, because in case of emergency, this is really the one you want to have, because it draws a lot of attention. And then we go further and you see that there is a red light as well, and the red light, of course, it is very usable if you're just in camp and you don't want to, well, basically have a lot of light, because if you have a lot of light shining on objects, your pupils will be very small and you won't see anything next to the light. And when you switch the light off, it will be pitch black and your eyes will have to adapt to the darkness. So with the red light, your pupils are quite wide and it's a more natural way of looking into dark red areas, and you don't have this on-off effect of your eyes basically. The red light is very convenient if you're walking or hiking and you're reading a map, because then you've got the map red in front of you, it's very visible, and when you look in the distance, when you see some red light, but you will see very well what is around you, just because your pupils are not going up and down the whole time. And the red light, it's something also which is good for if you're looking at animals, because they don't see this. Now, you've seen me fiddling around with the lighting modes and also with the tilting mechanism, and basically the button is way too small to be practical. Yes, here in the studio it works sort of fine, but in the outdoors, and especially when the weather gets a bit worse and it gets very cold, this is very hard to use. Small ridge behind the button, it's sort of practical because, well, if you get your nail around it, you can tilt the mechanism sort of easily. But when you are really gloved up, because it is that cold outside, button and tilting mechanism are very hard to use. So I would suggest to BioLite, please make a bigger button or even make 2 buttons for every light, one that work also simultaneously. And also put a little bit of rubber on top of this, because this one is quite slippery as well. So I'm not a great fan of the button. Now, that was a lot of information about the light itself. Now there are a few things that I would like to discuss on the headband itself. The headband itself, it is adjustable, of course. It's got 2 strap attachment thingies, so you can move it around. And I measured it, and it reaches, at the smallest it is 45 centimeters, and at its largest it is stretched to 63 centimeters. This means that in the smaller size it is also very good for kids. They can wear it very easily. And because of I like the colors that BioLite does on the 330. It is also a very kids-friendly look. Both my daughters, they like it a lot. Because it can be stretched so much, and that's the reason why this helmet is there. I've used it on some bicycle helmets, and it works well, as long as you don't have the cap in front of you, because then it won't fit. But for example, on climbing, mountaineering helmets, especially when you've got these attachment points, the headlamp works very well. That's why it's so good that it can be stretched. Now, let me get back to Lumen. As I mentioned before, BioLite claims 330 lumen, and that sounds very important. Lately I visited the ISPO outdoor jury meeting, and we had a headlamp that was rated 6,500 lumens, and we had an emergency torch or a search and rescue torch that was claimed at 15,000 lumens. And of course, the more lumens, the more light you'll have. Yes, that's a fact. But what hardly any manufacturer states is that where do they measure the lumens? It can be just the lumens that the light is emitting, so basically right in front of it, or just the energy. But it can also be measured at maybe 1 meter, or at 30 centimeters, or at 10 centimeters. We just don't know. What I always do when I test headlamps or bicycle lights, I use my lux meter. And my lux meter, it is this device. A lux meter, it is a meter where you have well, let me see if I can make this clear for you, where you have this white circular thing. This is basically a sensor, and it senses the light that falls onto this surface. And when I switch on the display on the other unit, then you will see a number, and it says something like 1200 lumen at the moment. And what, 1200 lux. The difference between lumen and lux is basically that lux is a way of measuring exactly how much light falls onto a surface. For example, if you do a lot of photography, and nowadays it's not that important anymore, but in the older days, everybody had a light meter, and that was just to pinpoint the light that falls onto an object, so you can adjust your camera according to the light settings. And this is basically the same. There's also an app for iPhone and for Android that you use it. I tried it several times and it's a bit less accurate. This one is a bit more accurate. Still, this is not a professional one, but it gives an indication on how much light I get. And I measure all the headlamps and the lights with my lux meter. So I know exactly how much light falls onto an object. Now, let's continue outside, because yesterday evening I did some footage on how I measure the lighting or the amount of light that is produced by the BioLite. Welcome to my field test laboratory in my backyard. And this is where the light lux meter is going to be very handy. As you can see now, it measures the amount of light coming from the black diamond headlamp, which is positioned below my GoPro. It reaches about 50 lux. Now when I get closer, and let me twist it a little bit, you can see it goes up to 170 lux approximately. Now when I take it a bit further away, you will see that it decreases. Now it's somewhere in the 35, if I can read it carefully, on my iPhone that is positioned below the black diamond and my GoPro. So this is quite a complicated setup. What this means is that the further the light source is from the spot where you want to have the light on, the weaker it gets. Well, that sounds logical, and this is where my garden comes in very handy. So what do I do in my garden? First of all, I've got the BioLite headlamp. It's mounted on a tripod and it shines onto a black spot in the back of my garden. On the floor of my garden, or on the ground, I've got this tape measure. And when we go further into the garden, you will see that there is a nice MSR red pack over here. And this is the first spot. This is the 5 meter point. And this is the first spot where I measure all the different light modes that the BioLite has. Now I do the same for the 10 meter point and for the 20 meter point. And this is how I collect my data on headlamps. Well, this is just for the video, because normally I do this when it is really pitch black, when there is no lighting, when the lights in the house and my shed are out, of course, and when I don't have a headlamp mounted on my tripod GoPro thingy. Now let's go back into the shed and I'll tell you all the results of all the measurements that I did. I hope that gave you some information on how I test. Now let's have a look at the values. Like I said, BioLite claims 330 lumen. What I measured with my lux meter was that in front of the 330 I measured 320 lux. So that is sort of similar. So the 330 is probably measured very close to the headlamp itself. And when it is on full beam and you want to use it close, well, it is a very bright lamp. And in that respect it's not very usable, so you'll have to dim it a lot to get a more usable lighting in front of you. Now let's continue to all the measurements that I made, and like I told you before, I measure it at 5, at 10 and at 20 meters. Now in full in maximum power on flood and spot together at 5 meters, I measured a maximum of 35.8 lux. And at a distance of 20 meters, I measured 1.6 lux. And I'm not going to tell you all the small numbers, but in this maximum, both units on power, you got the most usable light. When we turn it down to only the spot, the values are the same, because the spot will overpower basically the flood, of course, in the distance. Now when we go to the flood only, then I measure in the high power modus, I measure 3.8 lux at 5 meters and 0.2 lux at 20 meters. Now if I go to the very energy friendly low position of the power, then I measure at 5 meters 0.2 lux and 0 at 20 meters, of course. What I discovered is that let's say when both are on at maximum power, when you are hiking, this is basically the position that you want to have the BioLite headlamp 330 in, because it gives a very nice beam. If I relate it to headlamps that I tested in the past, I must say that it is not the most powerful lamp and it is not the best beam pattern that I have seen, but it is sufficient for if you do an outdoor hike. One thing that I would like to state is that if you hike in the energy friendly position with flood and spot on at 20 meters, it produces, or what I could measure with my lux meter, 0.1 lux. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is still usable, because when you have a full moon and a bright sky, you can see very well, and the full moon with a bright sky produces 0.25 lux. And in that relation, when I look at the values that BioLite states, the 75 meters for the spot, well, yes, I can imagine that you still measure at 75 meters some amount of light that is usable, but I don't think this is really a value that they make a big claim about, because it is just too little amount of light that you actually see. Now you know how much lux it produces, but you don't know how long the battery lasts in the several modi. I measured only the battery life in the full blast, spot and flood mode together. And BioLite claims it should last for about 3.5 hours, and I measured it 3 times and I came up to 3 hours and 45 minutes. This is of course influenced by temperature, and this was at around 17 degrees inside my house. So the 3.5 hours for, let's say, a normal use is really, I think it will last that amount of time. BioLite claims for the most energy friendly situation, it claims about 40 hours. Well, I think in my life, when I'm using a headlamp for 40 hours, most of the time I have a recharging point somewhere, or I can always use a battery pack to recharge it. So I didn't check the 40 hours because I just don't have that ambition. Now, recharging takes about 2.5 hours, so I think that is still pretty quick, and recharging can be done of course by a socket, a wall socket, of course by the computer, or just like I just mentioned, by a battery pack. I already mentioned the word waterproofness in the beginning somewhere when I talked about the battery pack and the rubber seal covering the micro USB opening, but I did not mention the waterproofness on the 330 in total. Well, the 330 is rated with a IPX4 rating, and IPX4 means that it is splash waterproof, and it doesn't matter from what direction that splash is coming. But now, if you live in a country where it rains a lot, or if you like hiking at night in really long downpours, or if you travel to countries where you have a lot of rain, then I would strongly advise you to buy a headlamp with a higher IPX rating. For example, a IPX8, which is really 100% waterproof. And now, I remember I forgot to tell you one thing on the button. If you press it for 8 seconds, it blocks the on-off mechanism. And that is of course a very good feature, because if you want to store your headlamp in your backpack during your hikes, then you don't want the battery to be drained by accident, and sometimes this happens if you can't block the on-off switch. So in this case, that is a very nice feature. That was a lot of information. Now let's head on to the verdict. How do I rate the BioLite Headlamp 330? Well, in the first place, of course, I really like its weight. It is only 69 grams, and that is very, very low. And also the headlamp, it is very nicely balanced because of the lamp in front and the lightweight battery pack on the back. When you are a trail runner or just a hiker, you don't feel the headlamp at all, and when you're doing speeds, you don't have this bouncy effect that some other headlamps have when you have a large heavy battery pack on the back or a large one unit in the front. So that is a very big pro. I do like the headband itself because it is very comfortable to wear and it is very well adjustable, and the fact that it is in its smallest also, well, very well for kids, that's something I like too, because we always forget about our kids and they deserve a nice headlamp too, and this is really, well, one for them. Then the lightning modes, I like the fact that there is a separate spot and a separate flood lamp, because it gives you a nice range of options, and also, well, basically the dimming feature works very well, so in that respect it's very usable. The amount of light, yes, it's there, it's good enough, but there are quite a lot of headlamps that will outperform and outpower the BioLite. On the downside, it's only IPX4 rated, so it is splash proof but not waterproof. So if you go to areas where you expect a lot of rain, then buy a different headlamp with a IPX8 rating. But the baddest thing is basically the button, the on-off button, and the button that changes through all the light modes, because it is just too tiny. Especially with cold hands, it's very, very impractical. When you're having gloves, not usable at all. Now, the price. It retails for $59.95 in euros, and the same in dollars, and it is $49.99 in pounds. And I think that is a little bit on the high side for a headlamp with these features. And therefore I rate the BioLite Headlamp 330 at 7.2 points out of 10 total. I hope you liked the review and that it was useful to you. And if it was, please give it a like and leave a comment below. If you didn't see the first part of this video, then you might not know that I am a 100% independent reviewer. I'm not being paid by manufacturers to make my reviews. I don't have any affiliate deals and I don't have advertisements on my website. And after reviewing, I always send the products back to where they came from. So if you value my way of independent reviewing and you want to support me, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the alarm bell so you know when I uploaded a new video. And also please follow me on Instagram and like my Facebook page. And if you do, many thanks in advance. Enjoy the outdoors. Ciao, ciao.